Hello, everybody. We'll begin, as always, with a bit of meditation to put our mind in the proper frame. So make yourself comfortable in whatever way you sit, head, neck, and trunk aligned. And just feel your body from inside your skin. Withdraw your mind from all its wanderings in the external world and enter the most sacred space in the universe. And as you feel that interior space, notice the flow and the touch of your breath in your nostrils. Just watch. And notice how, when you let go of trying to do breathing, breathing happens. Your breath begins to settle. And all by itself, it begins to become smoother and longer and more subtle. Just let that normal process continue. And you may also notice that as you let go of the effort to do breathing, you may also find some of your muscles beginning to let go, to relax. And you can potentiate that restfulness by just focusing on the parts of your body, starting from the top of your head and your forehead. Feel into any tight spots you notice, gently and lovingly, until the muscles just let go. Our body is like our 2-year-old child that raises a ruckus to get our attention, but then when we attend, they quiet right down. Feel around your eyes and eyebrows. And down into your cheeks and the corners of your mouth. Let your cheeks just hang on the bones of your face. Relax the corners of your jaw. Relax your neck. And from your throat center, feel out along your shoulders toward your fingertips, through your upper arms, and through your forearms, your hands, your fingers, and your fingertips. Let your breath flow free and deep. Relax your fingertips. Feel back into your fingers. Let your fingers go as if they could just float away. And feel back inside your hands. Let your hands go. Feel back into your forearms. Release your forearms. Feel back into your upper arms and let them go. And let your shoulders go. Feel back into your shoulders. And from your throat center, feel down into your chest. Relax your upper chest and upper back. Feel the muscles in between your ribs. Relax your rib cage. Feel into the center of your chest. Exhaling and inhaling. Free and deep from that space. Relax the center of your chest. And feel down into your abdomen. Relax your abdomen, your navel center. Feel down into your hip joints, your gluteal muscles, and then your thighs. Relax your thighs. Feel into your calves and lower legs. And then into your feet and your toes. Feel the whole body breathe, every cell, cleansing with the exhaling breath, energizing with the inhaling breath. Feel the flow of breath and prana in the space between your navel and your nostrils. Breath and mind flowing together. And just listen for your mantra or your favorite divine name or psalm. Feel that gentle song. Draw your mind more and more still. Now, feel that flow along the bridge of your nose, between the eyebrow center and nasagra, where the nose bridge meets the upper lip. Mantra sound resonating in that space. Now feel that flow through the left hand channel in the left nostril, Chandraswara, the lunar flow. Now feel that flow through the right hand channel in the right nostril, the solar swara. Now, leave left and right. Sink between these two into the Sushunya Swara, Sushumna. Breath may become very subtle. Just follow the presence of the mantra in whatever form. Let that awareness take you into a silent chamber, a chamber of silent presence. Mind strays. Gently bring it back. And just let it rise again. Gently rippling your calm mind. Let it merge again in the flow of breath from head to toe. Let your whole mind becomes full of that song. Keeping this awareness. Let your palms come before your face and your eyes gently open, reflecting that calm mind. And let your heart fill your palms with mental blossoms, fragrant blossoms, offering them for the well-being of all creatures. And with thanks to the Guru, the perennial light, shining from within, linking us heart to heart. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hmm. Well, good evening, everyone. Take a look and see. Oh, yeah. Wonderful. Ah, Sujata. Wonderful. Atsuko. Here's Jan. Terrific. As I was preparing for restarting our seminar, oh, the computer froze. I'm assuming you can hear me okay. There we are. Okay. Um, as I was preparing for restarting the seminar, I had in mind that we had finished chapter 4. When I picked the book up from the desk, I realized we hadn't quite finished it yet. A few more verses left right at the end, but really important verses. And so timely. Very, very timely, especially given the events in my city, which happened 3 blocks from here, just a few hundred yards away. It's where the lady was shot. So we've been dealing with demonstrations and federal agents and difficult situations all week. It's been pretty trying. And I think overall, people have done a pretty good job of keeping their balance. Some people lose their cool, and that's unfortunate. But that's really what we're going to talk about tonight, because we left off on page 96 of children's translation at about verse 36. And especially these last verses in chapter 4 say a great deal about the whole question of how to develop an attitude that, thank you, David, for putting the reference for the book up in the chat box. Um, these verses have a great deal to say about how to act in a situation like this in order to be effective. Um, and Shantideva uses uses a lot of battle metaphors here. Um, and Children takes the opinion that that's probably because he was a prince and from his caste, he was a kshatriya. Um, verse 36, I will not leave the fight until before my eyes these enemies of mine are all destroyed. For if aroused to fury by the merest slight, incapable of sleep until the scores are settled, verse 37, foolish rivals both to suffer when they die will draw the battle lines and do their best to win, and careless of the pain of cut and thrust will stand their ground refusing to give way. 38. No need to say that I will not lose heart, regardless of the hardships of the fray. These natural foes today I'll strive to crush, these enemies, the source of all my pain. Now, Chudrin, in her commentary, makes apologies for his using so many war metaphors here. What I'm hearing as he speaks these verses are the opening lines of the Bhagavad Gita. Dharmakshetre Kurukshetre Samaveta Yuyutsava Mamakaha Pandavaschaiva Kimakurvada Sanjaya. On the field of battle, on the field of action, on the field of Dharma, gathered together, spoiling for a fight. My sons and the sons of the Pandus, tell me, Sanjaya, what happened? Laying out the scene, right? You remember we talked a little bit about how when an avatara comes to the earth, when there's a divine descent into human personality, it never comes as an individual person. This is never the case. You have Rama, but you also have Dasharatha, his father. You have his brothers, Lakshmana. You have Hanuman, all these other characters. So the avatara comes as a whole social unit, you know. Same thing with Krishna, all these characters around Krishna. Same thing with Jesus. You have Jesus, but you also have Mary and Joseph, and you have Judas, who for so many centuries has been sort of cursed as being the person who betrayed Jesus. I actually think Jesus made a deal with Judas because he couldn't fulfill his mission. He couldn't fulfill the scripture without having someone voluntarily betray him. So he asked for a volunteer. And that volunteer consented, I think, probably knowing what would happen to his reputation, to lose his reputation for a couple thousand years. Imagine that. You know, Yogananda, I've mentioned many times, commented on this at one point. His disciple Kriyananda asked him a question one day about whether when a great master falls, do they fall further than an ordinary person? And Yogananda said no. He said, every good thing you do in your sadhana counts toward your enlightenment. He said, take Judas, for example. I knew him in this life. He had apparently met the reincarnated Judas somewhere up in the mountains. He was asking for a guru. So Yogananda sent him to somebody, and he said he was liberated in the recent past, but he still had a little problem with money. um, so the situation comes as a whole social unit. All the characters are there for whatever drama needs to happen on the field of dharma, on the field of action, which we hope to transform by our awareness into the field of Dharma. In her explanatory paragraph, Chudran says, his words, however, are not meant to convey aggression. The courage of the sansaric warrior is used as an analogy for the compassionate courage of the bodhisattva. We need bravery to non-aggressively stand our ground against the kleshas. With the weapons of clear determination, intelligent awareness, and compassion, we can short circuit their seductiveness and power. There is so much in that paragraph. So much in that paragraph that is medicine for what ails us at the moment. It's very hard in a situation like we have faced over and over again in the last week here in Minneapolis, for example, for people to just stand there and witness and record without giving in to their anger and rage about the injustice of what's happening. And it's really important to not do that because that's what the opponent is asking for. They're hoping to get people all riled up so that they can justify militarizing the whole situation. You saw yesterday how our president responded to the situation here by deciding to send 2,000 more ICE agents to Minneapolis in the last day. And they've been conducting raids all over the city today. And I hesitate to tell you some of the awful stories about it. But this business of non-aggressively standing your ground in witness to what happens before you is so important. This is the secret of Gandhi's satyagraha. Satyagraha means grasping the truth. And Gandhi understood how dangerous political demonstrations and crowds can be in India. They can just turn in a moment into some kind of a violent confrontation. Most of the time, the tourist manuals for people who are visiting India say that if you find yourself near a political demonstration, walk the other way, because it could very easily become unsafe. And the same thing is true here. Same things are happening here. And Gandhi knew that if he was going to succeed with nonviolent non-participation in the Raj of the Brits, that he was going to have people do some spiritual work with themselves in order to be able to stand there and keep their peacefulness. And even with Gandhi's people, it wasn't always perfect, but there were some instances. I've seen films during the Salt March, for example, where the satyagrahis come up to the soldiers, greet them lovingly, a loving pranam, lie down in front of them, get beaten to a pulp by the soldiers, and then carried off to the hospital. And the next person came, peaceably bowed, lie down, got beaten, carried off. You know, as a soldier in that situation, you can only do that so many times before your own conscience starts to get you about it. And that was the genius of Gandhi's nonviolent resistance. It wasn't showing the British people a lot of anger and rage. It was just holding up a mirror through their steady, calm, compassionate witness so that the Brits could see their own cruelty and feel the shame that they had about it. And in that way, Gandhi shamed the Brits out of India without firing a shot. Essentially, no Indian needed to fire a shot to destroy British oppression. Now, shots were fired, mostly by the British. And they took it on the chin for doing that. So keeping that balance in these situations is so hard. because we're pushed so hard by our own afflicted vrittis, our own kleshas, our own klishta vrittis. And this is exactly what Shantideva is talking about here. Here, Shantideva and the Yoga Sutras are flowing in perfect parallel. Of course, we may experience discomfort in the process, the same discomfort, restlessness we go through with any withdrawal. According to tradition, giving in to the lure of kleshas is easy in the beginning, but makes our lives increasingly more difficult in the end. In contrast, withdrawing from habitual responses is difficult, but our lives become increasingly more relaxed and free in the end. When we're going through klesha withdrawal, kind of like that phrase, it helps to know we're on the right track. Shantideva remarks that just as foolish rivals endure physical pain, sleeplessness, and even death, he will go through the anguish of detox to cease being a slave to his kleshas. He will not lose heart and give up because of pain or fear. And this is so important. This is the courage of compassion. And it really does take some inner steel to be able to bear these things without losing your balance. Anger and fear are the two most difficult kleshas for us in these kinds of circumstances. Obviously, our anger, our vehement response when we see injustice in front of us, and then our fear of death, our fear of somebody pointing a gun at us, for example. Can you stand it if somebody points an AK-47 at your face? It's important to think about that before you go out into a demonstration, because it could happen. It has happened here this week near my house, just up the street. And the preparation for that kind of courage is in facing your fears every moment by maintaining your awareness. We're not saying don't be afraid. I mean, that would be stupid and inhuman to not feel that fear. It's realistic. Your fear is an alarm system that tells you you're in danger. So to try to not feel it is ridiculous. It just puts you, it's one of the things I learned mountaineering is that the mountaineers who learn to be fearless get killed pretty quick. And I learned to respect my fear as I was climbing the very high summit ridge in the Andes one day. And I looked down the other side and it was like 2,000 meters down there. I couldn't even see an individual tree. And I thought, gosh, I'm kind of glad for my fear. Helps me put my foot in the right place every moment. And that's its function, to keep you safe. And then once it's done that function, then it's finished its mission. And it has no more use. And if you let that fear grow and grow and grow to the point where you become paralyzed by it, then you're also in danger. And so the way that you learn to eventually become fearless is to face your fears day to day, breath by breath, by remaining mindful, feeling the fear as it rises in you, and realistically assessing the situation. What do I need to do to act on this feeling in a way that keeps me safe? What can I do? Actually, this is the this is the question of ethics. Ethics is always an effort to answer the question, what shall we do? Now, so facing your fears bit by bit will gradually help your overall sense of fearfulness decrease over time. Just like with all the other primary fountains of desire, the more you face your fears, the more those fears naturally reduce. And you can actually reach a place in your life where you really don't fear death anymore?
Hey,
And
Stoma,
yeah,
as far as anger, I just get so angry watching these videos
oh,
of things that are
absolutely.
happening, but you can't really suppress it. You can't suppress your anger.
Right.
So, I guess I just try to bring myself back to my breath and my heart center and all of that again and again and again. But it's really been quite the practice this week.
Oh, yes. We're riding a bucking bronco, you know? And what's important isn't that you isn't that you try to drag the horse down to the ground. You can't do that. And if you try to do it, you're going to get hurt even worse, you know? You're absolutely right. You have to acknowledge the feelings that are there, the emotions that are there. The point is, do you allow them to take over your action? That's the question. So how can you rechannel that energy in some different way? I actually haven't gone to any of the demonstrations for a simple practical reason. I can't run. If they pull out tear gas or start shooting people, and they have started shooting people occasionally, I can't run away. So I'm just not going to do it. Besides, I put in I put in my time demonstrating during the Vietnam War. Um, and my place, I think, at this point is to do what I can to help other people have this ability to witness what's happening in these situations, to stand by peaceably and hold up a mirror to the cruelty of what is happening. There have been several stories about ICE agents in Minneapolis who've pulled guns on people who didn't run away and didn't get freaked out. And in one story that I heard, the ICE agent actually asked the person, "Well, aren't you afraid of me now?" That he was pointing his gun at him. The person said, "No, not afraid of you." And just kept on with that attitude. And finally, the guy just got bored and left. There wasn't anything more he could do to try to provoke this person. And that's exactly right. If you can manage it, if you can't manage it, you need to put that energy somewhere else. But you're absolutely right, Lori. It doesn't make any sense to suppress because if you suppress it, that energy is going to go somewhere and it's going to go somewhere outside your control, probably.
I must
And
confess to having I shouldn't mention names, but nasty fantasies about something happening to someone that's causing a lot of this pain for our community. And I try to catch myself, but my mind keeps going back there.
when I am so bedeviled by those thoughts that I have about these people, and there's more than one, of course, um, I have to remember the depth of the suffering that made them that way, the starvation for love and respect that is causing this behavior on their part. If I can keep my eye on that, then it's a little easier to figure out something a little more skillful to do, even if the skillful thing is just to run and get out of the situation. And if it gets to be too much, that's a reasonable response. There's no reason why you have to put yourself in a situation where you're going to get hurt, unless you're
I'd
doing
like,
it with that sense of solid, steadfast courage and are prepared to take the blow. Sorry, somebody was speaking up here.
in response to that, Stoma,
Hmm.
um, feeling compassionate for the person who obviously is uncomfortable in their own skin to the point that they're needlessly violent towards other people who are innocent. What hurts in the next level for me is to see that they're perpetuating the sad little child who's not been loved, or in all the children who are being harmed by this, How many children have witnessed their parents being harmed and taken away? And how many children are suffering that will continue to grow up and be violent themselves? And and that's way more than just on our streets
Yeah.
in the United States. It's happening in so many other countries and it happens all the time. And it's, I think for me, the heartbreaking piece is that as a human race, why do we still do that? Why have we not learned as a human race that, I mean, there's data, there's science, there's psychology. We understand that we're hurting each other and that that's perpetual by continuing. Why have we not put that into place? And I
You
know
know,
it's a hypothetical question. You don't need to try and answer it.
no, it is a hypothetical question, and this why question, which is so often in many instances is the wrong question, because the answer to the question is usually because I'm such a terrible person, or they're such a terrible person, or something of that nature. But so often the answer to this why question, when you're wondering about the things you're wondering about, is people carry their sanskaras. They're being driven, they're being driven by their lower mind, by the way that those sanskaras arise and create vrittis in the mind that push them to act in a certain way without any mindful awareness. And it's a little bit like being a therapist. The only way to meet that sort of thing is to meet it mindfully, is to sit there being mindful in the presence of that person. And there is something that often is catalytic about that, depending on the depth of your own practice. Remember uh, Patanjali talking about how the fruit of the establishment of nonviolence in someone's personality is that even wild creatures lose their animosity in the presence of such a yogi. And that's the sort of thing we're kind of trying to cultivate in people as much as we can. And if that kind of nonviolent steadiness is there, it's catching. I mean, the people obviously see the imperturbability on the faces of those people who can maintain that attitude. And part of them, no matter how badly they may be acting out, part of them is seeing that and saying, oh my God, how can I get that? What is that? And catalyzing that kind of curiosity on that person's part may somehow create an opening for something better to happen. At the very least, an aggressive and violent person may decide they're not going to get anywhere and just go off and see if they can find somebody they can irritate. Um,
See,
but
the
that's actually,
challenge,
go ahead, Sunita.
the challenge I'm finding is um, it's easy to talk to people who are on spiritual paths or who have wisdom some other way, um, to look at it and say, okay, look at it this in a peaceful manner or rational manner or non-violent manner. The challenge is the kids who are teenagers and in their 20s and 30s too, they are worried sick.
Of
They're
course.
almost paralyzed with fear. My kids are almost at that stage where they are almost paralyzed. And I just put down the phone after talking 2 hours with my son,
Mm.
who is afraid to get out of the house because his color of his skin is brown. And he's saying, Mom, they're not even going to look at I can't even carry my papers. Doesn't matter if I'm born in this country. So they are so afraid, the amount of fear that's being created. And now it's difficult. It was all I could hear is just hear him and just,
have him unload. But when I can't tell him, oh, you're not, you know, all I could say was, he said, how come you're not fearful? I said, well, I've seen too many things. I'm from India and blah, blah, blah. But I am afraid for my children.
Last Wednesday, after, one of the things that just confuses the heck out of me, if I were running something like ice and we had a terrible incident like this woman getting shot, the last thing in the world that I would do later in the day is go attack a high school, which is exactly what they did. They showed up en masse at Roosevelt High School, and just as the school was letting out, they started in on people. They started in on some of the students. They started in on some of the bystanders and the staff. It was such a terrible scene that the Minneapolis school district canceled school for the rest of the week because everybody was so freaked out. You got all these kids who spent their whole childhood wondering when the shooter's gonna come, and some guy from the government shows up with an AK-47 in their high school. You can see I get a little worked up about this as well. I mean, it is just it's beyond absurd that such a thing would happen. And I think the most powerful thing you could have done there, Sunita, is just listen.
I mean,
We
that's what I think.
we tend to discount the power of listening, but what listening does is it allows other people to have their emotions and to begin to work with them in a mindful way, even if they don't think they're doing it. Even if they wouldn't think of it in that way, it starts to happen automatically. That's why psychotherapy works. That's what the talking cure is, basically. It took me a long time to learn that the talking cure is not about what I tell people, it's about how I listen and keep my mouth shut. And I did a little experiment about this once. I didn't have much time for doing my ordinary practice, and so I decided, well, I'm just going to have to do my japa in between sentences while I'm doing therapy. So I started doing that, and as I did it, I got quieter and quieter and quieter. And after a couple of weeks of playing with this, I asked a few people. I told them what I was doing, and I asked them what they thought about it, and they said, "Well, actually, we like it when you don't talk so much." So that was a lesson to me. So I think your listening to that fear was very powerful. And I think it helps people to begin to figure out a way to rechannel that energy. That's the important task there. And it's not a matter of even providing solutions for people. People need to find their own solutions. Um, and I think we do probably the most service by doing what we can to help that happen. And actually, that's the same thing that happens when you are doing peaceful, nonviolent resistance. You're essentially doing the same thing. You're kind of watching and listening to people be cruel without losing your balance about it. And it forces them to start to re-examine their behavior. They can begin to see the cruelty of what they're really doing. There are stories of, people who weren't even immigrants having their front door kicked in by these guys. I just heard a story on National Public Radio tonight from some nurses where I used to work in the emergency room at Hennepin County Medical Center, and there were ICE agents in the stabilization room, in the absolute most emergent trauma center. These guys are standing there getting in the way of all the stuff that goes on in that room. Oh, I just couldn't believe what I was hearing.
Yeah, those are some similar stories I was hearing from my son, because
Yeah.
this is what's happening today.
It is crazy stuff, no question. But
Oh,
you don't have to become crazy in response to it as
yeah.
vehemently as you may respond. Is that Michael I hear?
Yeah, I have a poem I would like to read by Swami Rama,
Hmm.
and the poem is titled Violence. And then I have a comment after that I've been thinking about. I'm sure everybody's been thinking about it for a long time. But here's the poem. When for a moment I cast aside all rationalism and transport myself into the clear mountain air on the solitary rock, I spontaneously go into silence. Solitude keeps me alive in a society that knows no laws of love and harmony. Violence, violence, violence everywhere. I do not understand the law that prompts mortal beings to injure each other. How do they forget that all creatures are breathing one and the same breath? Why are they ungrateful, and why do they forget that all breathing beings are the children of one Father who is giving the life breath to all equally? From where arises this violence? What is that power that instigates them to annihilate each other's existence? I return to my silence without any reply and with a simple conclusion that human beings have not yet really found out the art of living harmoniously. The evil that forces one to commit such heinous crimes is because of himsa, the absence of love, consideration, kindness, and awareness that we all belong to one. By killing others, we are cutting the roots of the same tree whose limbs we are. Now, I'm gonna put something into the mix that is pretty difficult to think about. Another thing that I read by Swami Rama one time is he says, if there is one sin, it is annihilating one's conscience. Now, the British were defeated by Gandhi. I grew up on Gandhi. I spent years just nothing but reading Gandhi. And the Brit so many of the British people in India and in England were people of conscience.
Mm-hmm.
And so Gandhi's tactics were effective because it did call on a compassionate response to what's going on. Other places, and we can look at this all through history, there are individuals or even collectivities in which conscience seems to have been totally demolished. People without a conscience. And you can go into any society and you can just pick out instances of terrible atrocities and sadism. You can find people that glory in doing then hurting other people. They relish in the power that they have to cause other people misery. Dale Beagle, one time, he said there are some people that do not have empathy. Now, my feeling is that there is evil, that there is sin, or you can call it a crime, but there are things that go so far over the line that it's impossible. It's impossible to ignore it. And there's a book by Menninger. It said, "What became of sin?" In other words, there is something out there that is totally unacceptable. How to deal with it? How to deal with someone without a conscience? My God, I think that's the question, because you found in World War II, you find in a lot of places, you found it in Germany and Hitler and Poland and Auschwitz, that when people lay down, they say good, and they just get crushed. And there isn't there the conscience doesn't come forth. And so I don't know what to do about that. I understand perfectly, political strategy that Trump uses, which is to provoke somebody to the point where they retaliate, because then we'll really retaliate and we'll have all sorts of justification for what we do. And that's been the strategy forever. There's a book called the History of Nonviolence by Walensky, and he just talks about it, instance after instance after instance where repressive governments do that. They just provoke, provoke, provoke until they get a response and then crush, you know. And so I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about what I just said?
I
Because
do.
yeah,
A couple of things. We tend to think of this Kurukshetra, this field of action, as being a battlefield where there's a winner and a loser. We have, certainly people in my generation, had this hope that the virtues, for example, of the American system would gradually win out in this process of working towards a more equal society. I recently heard a talk by an historian from NYU who asked people, he said, you know, this strain of racism, white supremacy, and cruelty is part of the American character, and it always will be. It has been with us from the very first days that people came to North America, and it has never come close to going away.
uh,
And there'll always be this dialectical relationship between the two impulses in people. And the question is, how do we deal with that? And I think it's a representation, to put this in yogic terms, it's a representation of the battle that we're fighting, which is between mindful awareness on the one hand, the ability to keep your balance and to keep your behavior neutral, even when your emotions are going crazy, versus giving into your habitual tendencies, to what they're referring to in this text as klesha, and which we refer to in yoga as klesha. And Patanjali even says at one point in or I think this is in one of Vyasa's commentaries in chapter 2, he says its cause is beginning. It is beginningless.
yeah, yeah,
It's been. It's just. It's kind of part of our
yeah,
constitution, and we
yeah.
have to deal with it that way.
Yeah, I was thinking of, there's another little acronym up there, MAHA, Make America Healthy Again. But I'd take the H and I'd say Make America Honorable Again. And then I think again, I said, when were we honorable? I mean, going back in history, when were we
Right.
honorable?
Well,
Yeah.
in Trump's mind, it was the Gilded Age of the 1890s, which he's trying to reconstruct. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking, going back to the first Thanksgiving or something like that, when there was, some little gestures like that before, a whole tribe of Indians was annihilated, and I
Well,
should
and
really, I
yeah, I
really,
mean,
really
part
shake my
of
head about this.
part of the truth of the first Thanksgiving is that the way that those people survived was they took the seed corn for the next year's crop from the Indians. And the Indians went through some famine getting to the
Yeah,
place where they could have that first Thanksgiving.
yeah.
So it was a problem there. I actually sort of like the acronym Make America Mindful Again. Mama.
Yeah.
That's my.
Yeah.
I should have we should, there's a thing for the meditation center to do. Get some yellow hats with the word mama on it. Okay?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Let's think about that.
yeah, yeah.
What's the color of the most powerful form? Vajra Yogini is red. Okay.
Right.
Oh no, we don't want that. All right, that's already taken.
Sort of a rose colored.
Okay. Yeah.
The
I like
that
the rose color.
rose color on a yellow background, something like that. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just to
And
What about
Mary is blue, but anyway.
what about
Uh,
maca? Make America kind again.
well, that would be good too.
so
Be good
basically, I
too.
mean, the most root klesha is avidya, right?
Yes,
From which
exactly.
they all come back, stem from. So the antidote is mindfulness, awareness, every moment. And instead of
Yeah,
reflecting, because the mirrors only work so far, they only
that's
like
the thing.
6 or 7 or 8, 10 levels deep at the most. Got to become a window.
I'm
And
very
as
fond.
Rumi mentions, even you don't even need the wall to have the window. So anyway, no latches.
I'm very fond of Savita Agrawala in India. She puts up these really cool posts all the time from Swami Veda's work and Swami Rama's work. And the thing she put up today, which I thought was just wonderful, was about, you know, if all you did in your life is just remain mindful of your breath moment to moment through your whole life, no other asanas, no other sitting meditation, nothing. If that's all you did, it would change everything. It would change everything. That kind of mindfulness. That's why we often say breath awareness is the most powerful practice in yoga. It's also the simplest.
Yeah.
And it's the one that's the most transformative of all because it transforms every practice that you do from, being an external exercise, some kind of calisthenics, to a mind-body coordination. Um, so just to keep going a little bit here, in 39, Shantideva says, the wounds inflicted by the enemy in feudal wars are flaunted by the soldier as a trophy. So, in the high endeavor for so great a prize, meaning enlightenment, why should hurt and injury dismay me? And verse 40, when fishers, butchers, farmers, and the like, intending just to gain their livelihood, will suffer all the miseries of heat and cold, how can I not bear the same to gain the happiness of beings? She's talking about this whole process of gradually detoxing from the comfort of our habits. We want to escape all this mishigas. We want to turn off the news. We want to hide in our homes. And unfortunately, that's a recipe for trouble. That's what happened in Germany and Poland and all those other places. 41, when I pledge myself to free from their affliction, beings who abide in every region, stretching to the limits of the sky, I myself was subject to the same afflictions. Thus I did not have the measure of my strength. To speak like this was clear insanity. More reason then for never drawing back, abandoning the fight against defiled confusion. Children says, when he says that taking the bodhisattva vow is clear insanity, he's not expressing feelings of despondency or inadequacy. He's saying it as an incentive to get busy, to do whatever it takes to live his life as attentively and wakefully as possible. Instead of indulging in guilt and other variations on the theme of failure, he spurs himself on. Imagine Gandhi dealing with a situation where he's starting to lose his grip on the process towards the period as he got closer and closer to independence and to the eventual partition of India. People were starting to turn violent, and he couldn't stop it. Now, he could have just sort of stormed off and said, "You people are all failing your mission," and gone off in a big huff. But he didn't do that. No, he kept on. He kept on with the same attitude he had always had. And I think, an awful lot of people died in that whole period in India. But I think a whole lot more people would have died if Gandhi had not been able to keep that level attitude. Even when it seemed to him like it was getting, like he was sort of losing his grip on the situation. Verse 43, "This shall be my all-consuming passion. Filled with rancor, I will wage my war." Now let's change the wording here a little bit. Filled with energy, I will do my best. Though this emotion seems to be defiled, it halts defilement and shall not be spurned. Children says in verse 43, this emotion is anger. Although it's usually seen as a problem, Shantideva takes a homeopathic approach and vows to use anger to cure anger. Rousing his passionate enthusiasm for the task, he proceeds with all-consuming warriorship and joy. His anger ends up becoming a passionate commitment to doing the best that he can do. As years go by, she says, I understand this kind of passionate determination and confidence more and more. The choice is mine. And that's the key thing. We have a choice. We have a choice to either be mindful or to surrender to our habits and our kleshas. I can spend my life strengthening my kleshas, or I can weaken them, thin them down, as Patanjali says. I can continue to be their slave or realize they're not solid. I can simply accept them as my own powerful yet ineffable energy. It's increasingly clear which choice leads to further pain and which one leads to relaxation and delight. Makes me think of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the great German theologian, one of the very few religious people who stood up to Hitler, who was captured and imprisoned and was executed 3 weeks before the end of the war. And when he was hung, he walked to the gallows whistling a cheerful tune because he knew he was dying for the right reason. He had reached the moment where it was clear that it was time for him to give up his life. And he had no problem with that because his conscience was clear and solid and steady and steadfast. Verse 45, common enemies, when driven from the state, retreat and base themselves in other lands, and muster all their strength the better to return. But our afflictions are without such stratagems. Defiled emotions scattered by the eye of wisdom. Where will you now run when driven from my mind? Whence would you return to do me harm? But oh, my mind is feeble, I am indolent. She comments here on verse 46, happiness comes with knowing that once they're uprooted by the eye of wisdom, the kleshas can never return. Their power evaporates once we see their empty, ephemeral nature. Zigar Kongtrul recalls how terrified the youngest monks in the monastery would be by the annual snow lion dance. When they got older and realized the snow lion wasn't real, it was only a costume, they automatically lost their fear. It's a nice way to think about learning to see kleshas in their appropriate context and how much of our suffering is about pursuing our desires and ending up experiencing the pain that comes from that. So verse 47, and yet defilements are not in the object, nor yet within the faculties, nor somewhere in between. And if not elsewhere, where is their abode? Whence they might wreak their havoc on the world. They are simple mirages. And so take heart. Banish all your fear and strive to know their nature. Why suffer needlessly the pains of hell? Come to know your fear. Make a friend of it. Making an enemy of fear is a big mistake. I discovered this in my efforts to become a mountaineer. I was going to conquer my fear of heights. But then I decided my fear of heights helped me to keep my feet in the right place on the slope. So I decided it wasn't so bad. And at that point, my fear became something that alerted me to my safety. And then I could put my energy into maintaining my safety. He says, Children says, despite all this war imagery, Shantideva is not really encouraging us to do battle with the kleshas. He's asking us to examine them carefully and discover their illusory nature. And that's what making a friend of your fear is about. The goal really is ultimately to have no enemies, to be able to take apart your construct of what an enemy to you is, because the reality of the enemy is in your own mind, always. And if you can somehow find your way through that, then you'll find a way to relate to the situation so that you can be the mirror that other force needs to have.
That's a really good thing. What is your concept that you have in your head of what the enemy is? Because it's so easy to, work with platitudes.
She tells a story here. She says, my friend's father has Alzheimer's disease. Previously, he was a very angry man, but since he lost his memory, he's changed because he can't remember what he was angry about. He can't fuel his bitterness. When he becomes irritated, he just can't make it stick. Without his storylines, the
Yeah,
causes for anger dissolve.
yeah.
So it's our narratives about our situation that create the enemies we think we have. They may be adversaries. I mean, we may be doing realistic battle with people or situations, but the enemy nature of the other side is our own creation. As Swami Veda used to say, nobody can make you angry. The anger is in your own mind, and the other person is only holding up a mirror to it. So deal with it. He used to tell Ushu. And
Two things.
Ushu learned his lesson too. Go ahead, Michael.
I was saying that the two things that you've been emphasizing is looking at the stories we tell ourselves and then coming back to the breath to gain the balance and the perspective. This is what Eckhart Tolle's been talking about for 20 years.
Yeah,
There's two main things that he talks about.
that's right. I'll just go into the last verse of the chapter here so we can say we really have finished it. Verse 48. This is how I should reflect and labor, taking up the precepts just set forth. What invalid in need of medicine ignored his doctor's words and gained his health?
Mhm.
So you're right, Michael. That is exactly the thing. And what we're about to get into here in chapter 5 is an explanation of the 6 paramitas. The 6, usually they're described as perfections. The word paramita means gone to the other side. Ita is from the verb root I, means go. Ita is a past participle. So it's gone to the other, to the para. It's paramita. And so gone to the other side, transcended. Not so much perfection as transcendence. I think that's a helpful thing to keep in mind. And there are six of them. And on page 104, in the beginning of the fifth chapter, is it 104? No. Where is it here? She lists out the six paramitas. Find it here. There we are on page 108. She describes them as generosity, discipline, patience, enthusiasm, meditation, and wisdom. And I looked up the Sanskrit words for the paramitas, and I would translate them a little differently. Generosity, yes, dana, giving alms. Shila, she translates this as discipline. Shila really means conduct. The rules for the conduct of monks are called the rules of Shila in Buddhism, and same essentially in Hindu Sanskrit as well. And so really it's talking about good conduct, and the nugget of that good conduct is ahimsa, nonviolence. Conduct which is informed by nonviolence. Then we have kshama, translates here as patience. That's pretty accurate. Then dhairya, and she translates dhairya as enthusiasm. Dhairya really means fortitude, steadfastness. So on the one hand, it's sort of a steadiness. The place where the enthusiasm gets in there is in terms of the uh, commitment to a cause. That's another meaning for the term dhairya.
Isn't
Well,
dhairya patience?
it can be, sure. But I think it comes from dha, the verb root to place. So steadfastness and fortitude, I think, are better translations of it. Then,
Okay.
of course, um, she says meditation, dhyana, and wisdom, prajna. Um, those are both pretty good translations. But the chapter that we're about to get into is about how to cultivate that discipline of mind that puts you in the right place to be able to conduct yourself on the field of Dharma, on the field of action. I marvel at the way that the Yoga Sutras and the Bhagavad Gita and this text are all sort of flowing together in this. It's beautiful.
It's pretty amazing that that we're reading this text at this particular time. This confluential coming together of these two things. We couldn't ask for a better text.
That's right. And I'm going to give you credit, Michael, because you're the one who
Oh, as
came up
Gary
with
Grant,
it.
you give Gary Grant credit
Was it
for that.
Gary? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll give credit to anybody. No, I think that's very true. And there has been a kind of momentum to this discussion all the way along. I'll tell you a little personal secret. Sometimes I'm pretty tired. Sometimes on Monday, I come back from my workout about 4 o'clock in the afternoon and I think, oh my God, I got to do that class tonight. Do I really want to do that? Or would I rather watch NCIS? My habits start to get the better of me. But every time I sit down to sit with you all and go through this text, something so beautiful has happened every single time. That's one of the reasons I keep putting these recordings up on my YouTube channel, because there is something happening here that I feel a wave of some kind coming up underneath what we're doing that carries me into such a lovely place every week, every time we meet. And
My,
it is exactly the right text for us to be looking at,
yeah, my
especially at this moment in
my
history.
my feeling is that the Himalayan tradition and what's being taught right now, and the kind of discussions that we're having are that we're asked to do something quite great right now in our tradition. Almost like, being the leadership role that we have,
Yes.
kind of carrying the banner of the proper way to work through the world's miseries, and that our tradition is giving the answer out, and it's a time to really, really come together, go very, very deep into our meditations, and then go out in the world with this wonderful, beautiful attitude.
We have the gift from the tradition,
Yeah.
the awareness of the subtlety and the universality of the mind field. And even this makes the point for the importance of our peace meditations on the full moon every month. That's part of what helps to try to provide some pacifying energy to this roiling time in history. What promises to be a time of incredible change, and that's certainly been happening this year. And so yeah, I think we do, even when we're sitting in our meditation at home and calming our mind without any particular action in mind, we're helping everybody else also.
Yeah, we're in a new age now. This is like, they talk about the ancient age and they talk about the Middle Ages and the Age of Enlightenment. We're in a new age now, and I think that our tradition is primed itself to work with what's going on in the new age.
I really appreciate the fact that we can talk about it tonight, Stoma, and relate it all together. It's really helpful.
So important. So important.
Yeah.
May I just make a quick announcement?
Sure. Yeah.
So Sunday is Mauni Amavasya, the new moon and a day of silence. And we will be working with Saumya mantra on that day at the center. We will be zooming that entire day. We will start with the puja in the morning for Saumya Tara, and then we will be doing puja all day. So join us if you can, in person or by Zoom.
Yeah, even for just part of it. Thanks, Emilio. Well, just take a moment right where you are. Whatever you're doing without changing anything, just go to your breath. And notice what happens. A change in your mind. And maybe a change in your body. Just observe that wave of breath and prana. That ocean in which you participate. Om Tat Sat. Brahmarpanamastu. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. As Swamiji used to say, may God and Guru bless us all. See you all next week, everybody. We'll have another beautiful time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You.
Happy dreams.
Thank you.